and welcome to this week's podcast. I am Marina Perry, your host, and today on the show we have such a beautiful story, a story of success, a story of healing, a story of expansion with our amazing guest, Jennifer Cauchi. She is the founder of blūm Organics, which is a product range that we're going to dive into, and she's going to explain to us, but they're unbelievably supportive of enhancing the feminine, and they're organic, and they're a big part of her journey. And now she is a thriving entrepreneur, and she's going to share a lot of about how she came to be such. So please welcome Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I would love to know, first off, and I know it seems a bit of a random question, but if there was an animal that best represented you, or most apparently, was a representative of your personality trait or whatever, what animal would that be and why?
I think it would have to be a monkey.
Awesome.
I think because I'm very playful and I love practical jokes, but I'm also very curious and inquisitive, and I love problem solving. And I think I look at a monkey and I see that they're very restless, and I feel that myself because I'm someone that can't stay in the one place for too long. I love moving around. I've lived in 6 countries and I've traveled to 50 countries. So wow. I've done a lot of roaming.
Yeah. So tell us then, with the 6 countries, I mean, you live in Australia now. Mm-hmm. Where have you lived other than Australia?
So I lived in Malta for a while. My husband's Maltese, so we spent a bit of time there. I've lived in Barcelona. I lived in London. I lived in Canada. I lived in the US. I'm probably forgetting one, but we love traveling. I spent the majority of my 20s traveling, so I was very blessed.
Beautiful. And if you could go anywhere right now for a holiday or a getaway, where would you choose to go?
Vancouver. 100%. Yeah.
Because
it's really interesting to me because I felt like I was done with my traveling and I felt like I was ready to settle down and come back to Australia. But I heard this calling. It was like a voice on my shoulder, and I felt that about London. But Vancouver, it was like, you've got to go to Vancouver because something pivotal is going to happen there. And that's exactly actually what happened. I didn't realize that Vancouver was this mecca for wellness in the world. And that's where my healing journey really started. And I could submerge myself in the healing energy. And I really believe that when you have a connection with the land and you're tapping into that, like I know that my body needed the vibration that was available to me there. So it's about following the nudges. I heard this nudge. I was like, I really want to have kids. I'm going to be getting older. I don't know if I want to wait another 2 years, but I listened to that. And that's been the pivotal point in my journey. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't have moved to Vancouver.
Okay. So you'd go back there. Got it. So tell us then, because we're diving into that. So tell us about this pivot point, because a lot of people don't know that you probably weren't always, an entrepreneur of organic products, that there was a different reality before that. And you did have a pivot point. So tell us your story, because I think it's a one that actually many women can relate to, and men.
Yeah. I had a very different life. I wouldn't recognize myself today if I knew the things that I was doing back then. And as I mentioned, I was lucky enough to spend my 20s traveling and living overseas. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was actually doing was running away from my problems. I had this textbook successful career as an interior designer. And I remember when I was young, getting these design magazines and cutting out, like, this was my manifestation board, but I didn't know what that was at the time. And my dad saying to me, there's no money in that. So initially my programming was to not follow what it was that I was interested in. It was like, follow where the money is. But I ignored that and went on to live my dream as being a interior designer. And it looks really glamorous from the outside. But then the reality of it is that we're often working really long hours to meet deadlines. And for me, I landed some really amazing positions that gave me really good opportunities. So I had this enormous pressure that I'd put on myself that if I wanted to keep this reputation, I had to keep performing at a certain level. And I became reliant on external stimulants. I had coffee. I was like addicted to coffee. I was relying on alcohol at night to numb the stress that I was feeling, and I was just getting through the day with sugar. So I was on this adrenaline roller coaster, and I had no idea how to get off it until all these symptoms began to surface. And it was like this domino effect. And I had anxiety, insomnia, and eventually my period went missing. And I had literally began to tear holes in my stomach. The stress was tearing holes in my stomach. And after visiting doctor after doctor, and they were sort of just telling me, oh, it's all in your head. And I hear so many women saying this. There's no validation around the way that we're feeling. It's like, oh, you're creating this in your own mind. There's not actually anything there. And I even said to them, can you please test me for celiac disease? Because I knew my grandmother was celiac. So it's hereditary. And 2 years went on, and I actually just could not get out of bed at one point. I was at a point where I was medicating one problem, and then another problem would come up. And I was completely unaware of natural medicine at this point in time. And I had no awareness around the fact that it was actually my soaring cortisol levels that were the root problem of all these physical symptoms that I was experiencing. So, as many of us do when we're overloaded with commitments, the first thing that often falls off the priority list is taking time out for ourselves. And we might be aware of what stress is capable of doing. But for me, my body was sending this like blaring warning sign, and it had shut down the ability for me to procreate. I eventually ended up with this diagnosis of hypothalamic amenorrhea. And if people haven't heard of that term before, it's just a fancy way of saying unexplained absent periods. And I went from specialist to specialist and eventually ended up with an endocrinologist. And I was thinking, okay, this is going to be the guy that's going to tell me what actually is going on. And all he said to me was, you've got HA. And no answers, no tools on how to deal with it. Just when you want to have a baby, we've got options. We've got IVF. So this was this realization to me that I was putting everything ahead of myself because I was so focused on the doing and the pushing. And that was when it really hit me, because in my soul, I knew I wanted to have this career, but the thing that was most important to me was being a mum one day. So I felt like if I can't do what I'm fundamentally programmed to do, what a woman is meant to do, then what is the purpose of all of this? So eventually, fast forward a few years, I jumped ship from the conventional doctors and got introduced to naturopathic medicine and alternative forms of healing. And that really started me on my healing journey. And there were so many things that I did, and we can definitely touch on those. I was doing all the external stuff, but it wasn't until I started working on the internal stuff. Everything changed when I invested in my mindset, and we finally looked at my cortisol levels and they were sky high. And I actually didn't think that I was stressed at the time. I thought I wasn't stressed, but my blood work was telling me a very different story. My cortisol levels were through the roof, and my naturopath was like, okay, we need to start working on your mindset. So a lot of things happened in between. But eventually that resulted in my cycles returning, and I naturally conceived my son. So it was this realization that we have so much power when we can tap into our own needs. And I think, I wanted to create this solution for women to be able to access the power of their mindset. So I had this idea. And it actually stemmed from when I was working as an interior designer, this little ritual that I would do before a presentation where I didn't realize what it was at the time. My friend had given me some lavender essential oil because I would say to her, oh, I'm nervous before a presentation. And I'd go into the bathroom and just inhale the lavender essential oil, and it would make me feel calm. And when I did that, I presented so much clearer. I was so much more confident. So I wanted to create something for what I needed and what I knew other women would need. And it sort of led me on this path to studying organic skincare formulation. And I birthed blūm Organics to inspire every woman to bloom into their fullest expression and their highest potential.
That's beautiful. I love that story, and you share it so eloquently. It's funny. I was thinking as I read a little bit about your story before our interview that that flashed into my mind. Oh, I have that T-shirt. The one where it's like the same story essentially. And I think it's too common a story for so many people, but especially women who aren't taking the time, and we are burning the candle at both ends, or every which way direction. It's like a bushfire going crazy, and hormones really do control the show. So, as you were saying there, but hormones not just as an estrogen, progesterone, and much like you, I also lost my period, and it was a combination of unbelievably stressful achievement junkie kind of mindset. Do more, 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 think, do, think, do, and a combination of foods that was destroying my gut biome. So I was never a coffee drinker when I was younger because I'm one of these rare humans on the planet who doesn't like the taste of coffee, but sugar. Yeah. And so can completely relate to what you're saying. The same story with the medical system, giving me more pills and more potions and not having a period. And it's often, I don't know if you found this, but it's like every little symptom it's the universe giving you a feather. And then eventually something will, if you're lucky, and I always say this, if you're lucky enough, you'll get a severe enough symptom that you'll pay attention. Not so severe that it's, now a fatal diagnosis, but even those, people can come back from, but something that really matters to you. And it might even be a vanity point. Like for me, it was like acne came through and I was like, hello, what? I'm going to look at this now, even though all the other signs were there. And one thing I wanted to just touch on, because I know that many women listening will run this same story that I had and that I just heard you say, which is, I didn't think I was stressed. But it's important for everyone to remember that it's like the frog in the boiling water. You adapt so amazingly because you're an amazingly efficient machine to the pressure that you're under, and then you continue to load and load and load. And as we do that, adrenal fatigue actually has us sense less and less feedback of stress. So you can feel like the most chilled person, but that's actually because you eroded your natural stress reflex. And I think that's a really important thing for us to converse about, because most people say, oh, but I'm not stressed. Yes, you probably go 3 years of anxiety and then you stop being stressed, but that's because your system's like, well, she's not paying attention. So what's the point? And we're worn out. But tell us then, for you in particular, because your products, I mean, I know not everyone is watching this on video and they'll be mostly listening via podcast, but I have in my hands 2 beautiful aura mists that are from blūm Organics. And one is a feminine rising and one is goddess essence. And they have different words on them. One says soften, surrender, release, receive. That's the feminine rising. And the goddess essence, I have to say that way, is breathe, reset, and reconnect. So there, and I have to also give you snaps, Jennifer, because your packaging is just sublime. It's everything with this product is truly top notch and high quality. Even this beautiful Moontime bath salts comes with, a really natural bag inside a beautiful lush box. So they're perfect gifts as well. I can see, what you put into them. But talk to us about, what is an aura? For someone who doesn't know, and why would they need an aura mist?
Yes. Okay. So this was a new concept to me as well. So our aura is essentially the energy that we're giving off beyond our physical body. And we can actually measure our aura in colors, and scientific research shows that you can measure an aura in a room. So it may be that you've experienced being in a room where you can feel someone's presence beyond them even speaking. They may not even need to say anything and you can feel their presence. Or you might be walking down a street and a couple's just had a fight, and you might not know they've had a fight, but you can feel that when they walk towards you. So essentially, we are projecting what we're feeling energetically inside ourselves beyond our physical body. And this is something that we're not taught about. And for me, a lot of the time I felt like I was this internal shitstorm, but everyone would actually comment that I was like the most calm person that they'd ever met, which was really interesting to me. So I realized how good I was at suppressing my emotions and not facing my emotions. And I think we're facing this almost epidemic of anxiety, suppressing what we're feeling. And for me, I wanted women to be able to have that time to pause and take the opportunity for themselves. I wanted to create a tool that allowed them to anchor back into themselves, facilitate that moment for them to check in with themselves and recalibrate their energy. So blūm's product range allows you to connect with yourself, your heart and your breath, and to align with the present moment. And how can we do that? Well, that's by going inward and getting to know ourselves and integrating meaningful moments in every day rather than waiting till the end of the day when you might have that space in your day to do a meditation practice. I know that's not practical for me as a mother. There'd be things coming up for me during the day where I was feeling stressed and anxious, and I was projecting that onto my child. And it's actually something that I'm still really working through at the moment, because I can speak to him in a calm voice and he can pick up on the energetics. So we can't fake that. We can't fake energetics. You can't fake your aura. It really does take doing the inner work. And it's something that people are fearful of facing. So I wanted to make it really accessible, really tangible, where we're living in this world where we're used to having something tangible. So you might be able to say to someone that's completely foreign to meditation, go and meditate. And they just don't do it because they need that tool. And that's why I created blūm. It needed to be something that could be used in those fleeting moments, anytime and anywhere, for convenience and for busy women. And let's face it, we're all busy. So the idea of it is that you mist the spray on your face around your auric field. You experience immediate shift in your energy, and each ingredient was specifically chosen to induce a desired response from the limbic system. So our olfactory receptors in our nose, which are our smell receptors, they send a signal to our limbic system. And that is done by choosing specific ingredients to induce a certain emotion. And then I've layered that on with the energetic properties of the crystals, because we know that crystals have the ability to influence our vibration. And when they are submersed into the hydrosol, which is actually the liquid that you see inside the bottle, it's amplified. So we can use that and spray that around our auric field, and it's about being intentional about how we want to use the product. And it's a moment, 90 seconds, I say, is all that it takes to change the way that you're feeling. I use it all the time, especially the God Essence, because when I feel that anxiety coming up, I take that moment, as it says on the front, breathe, reset, reconnect. And it actually works. It actually works. If I was waiting till the end of the day to do meditation, I could do that, but it's not going to change the way that I'm reacting to people and situations that are coming up for me in the day.
Yeah, I think this is, I think for people to really understand what we're diving into today, it's perhaps necessary, or at least something that people are prepared to open to, which we've talked about many times on this podcast, but the concept that everything is energy. Everything is energy. And so when you talk about, and it's beautiful in this essence spray here, there you can tip it upside down and I can see the crystals that are placed in there. And I have so many crystals. I'm like it's like a crystal castle in my house. And you only need to hold a crystal to understand that frequency is very real in any item. And, what you described before about auras, it was, I think, not until my 30s that I even first saw my energy body. I was in Bali and I really saw my energy body, and it was like a massive shift in the realization I'm not just my physical body, and I'm not my mind, and I'm not my thoughts and all those things that are already attuned to, but this awareness of this field beyond that which we see. And as you so eloquently point out, you do feel it. Someone might be saying, oh, everything's fine. And yes, body language communicates a lot too, but there is a sense of feeling the field. And as we, I believe, get off things like the uppers and the downers, let's call it, the numbers and the stimulants, we can actually feel the field again, because we've lost that art. And I don't know if that was true for you, but certainly for me growing up, I didn't even, talking about a field, if we weren't talking about a meadow, would have just sounded like hippie trippy stuff. But once you actually dive into that, you can feel and work with energy. And it's very real. And can you talked about, and, I understand it, but I think the listeners, it would be really valuable. Olfactory is a massive well, a cognitive sense for recall. We have so many memories tied to it, but it's a massive stimulant. And you were talking about that this is specifically designed for the limbic system. So could you unpack what that means by limbic system for anyone listening who's like, I've never heard that word before?
It's all connected. So our limbic system has a direct impact on our brain and what we're experiencing and what is true for us in our moment. And it's so easily influenced. And so when we are, like, as you say, when we're experiencing a memory or a feeling, it takes us back into that moment. And I work specifically with mothers that are going through pregnancy and preparing themselves for the birth, and they can bring themselves into a meditative state using this scent and then take that into the birthing space. So we can use that to leverage for any experience that we're going into in life. There's a spray, Lioness, which uses tiger's eye crystal to enhance courage and communication. And I advise people to sit with that and meditate and spray that spray and really feel into themselves to what it feels to be empowered and to know that they are powerful, and say the mantras, because there's so much power in what we're telling ourselves. Our bodies are always listening, and the power of words is so important. So if you can sit with that spray and really feel into what it feels to be empowered, the next time that you use that mist, the brain is going to trigger that memory and take you back into that state. So it's so powerful.
It's an anchor, essentially, for anyone who, understands anchors. It's an anchor. And I love that it's a tool, because the irony, and you did point it out already, is so often we know what we should do. We know, I should take breaths, or I should pause for a minute, or I should drop into the present. We hear these statements all the time. But ironically, it's sometimes like holding something in your hand makes it a thing to do. So even though we're saying, let's be less doing and more being, what we can at least leverage off there is the reality that we are used to doing. So yet let's use our doing ability to drop into being. I love that. I think that's genius. And what I'm also hearing from, what you're saying about the breath and the thoughts is really the power of intention, which is everything. So even if, someone just, it takes time in the day to really go, okay, who do I want to be today? Or who do I want to be in this moment? Whether they've got the myths or not yet, they can start doing that today. And they can just bring their awareness to intention, because we are a supercomputer where life is holographically being presented by what we're deciding on the inside, as you just said. So would you agree with that these are tools to bring presence and power into your intention?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think we forget that we aren't human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, but we're so conditioned to remove ourselves from the spiritual side of things. And that's why it feels so good when we get to do these things, when we get to do these practices.
Now, something that I noticed in some of your copy and your media and marketing is ceremony and rituals seem to be a big part of how you use the products, but particularly the ethos of the brand. So could you speak to us about the value of ceremony and ritual, or are they the same? Are they different? How could someone start introducing these, and why would they want to?
So there's these things that we go through in life that we tend to gloss over. We have no recognition. And for me, the earliest memory, I suppose, of that would be getting my period for the first time, which is a huge rite of passage. And to me, there needs to be a ritual that comes with that. But, in the 90s, it wasn't such a big thing. It was like this embarrassing thing. I think the only comment that I got from my mum was, I know, sweetheart, it's not fair. Your brother doesn't have to deal with this. And if it was just reframed at the time to be like, wow, you're becoming a woman and look at the power that you have within yourself to create new life, it would have changed everything. So it's that recognition. And I've spoken about this with my friends, and we grew up in a Catholic. I grew up going to a Catholic school and in a Catholic household. And for me, I almost resented that, and I moved away from religion. I think as we've seen a decline in religion, we've lost tradition as well. So as the popularity of that goes down, we've almost thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And for a lot of people, that was their connection, that was their community, they're coming together. And it's in our DNA, it's in our bloodline to want to come together. And that's why it feels so good as women when we come together. And I think for motherhood, that maiden to mother rebirth that we experience, because we just gloss over that and make it all about the baby, to me, I feel that that is what has created this epidemic of postpartum depletion. Even myself, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression, and I could have got really attached to that label. I knew, because I have such a great awareness of myself, that it absolutely wasn't postpartum depression. I didn't need medicating. I just needed someone to hold my baby so that I could tend for myself and have that time and space to process what I'd just been through and get familiar with this new identity, because that's a time when you lose yourself. And I see so many mothers going through that. And these are the huge rites of passage that we go through as women, and it's downplayed. To me, the biggest thing, I think that the patriarchy is threatened by this, when young women have their period, and it's very easy for us to look at the symptom side of things. And this is where you get on that path of just medicating and spot treating all of the symptoms that are coming up. But if we reframe that and imagine a world where young girls are taught that our menstrual cycle is our magic, during that time, this is an opportunity where parts of our brain are engaged in other times of the month that they're not. And this is our goddess energy, our life force energy that can't be replicated. So even if we're not wanting to create new life during that time, it could be a project, a creation, a new idea. Everything is nurtured during that time. And I feel like it's so important. I'm not a master in holding ritual or ceremony whatsoever, but I've done that for my friends. And you know what? We've gone around the room and given words of wisdom to the new mum. And that is something I will never forget. And the women in the room all have the same experience. It is so sacred and something that just we will deeply hold with us till our last breath, because it's just so important. And it's something I hope that I have a daughter one day so that I can pass this on. So a ritual is just so important. We need to bring it back. I think that there is more awareness coming around this topic, but even with my aura mist, we're bringing those into the ritual of taking that so that you can experience what you experience on the day and then take it into your daily life.
And I would like to piggyback on that and add, the thing about ritual is it doesn't even always have to be those big markers. Back in a much slower time, which many I think is less magical, but I don't know these days. In a much slower time, the preparation of food was ritualistic. There was Thanksgiving before every meal, the family gathered at the table. So it's not that it needs to be the new moon or the full moon ceremony, or it needs to be the mother's birthing, although I think those are essential too. I'm pro all of the rituals, but just to remind everyone, it can literally be a practice of gratitude, like bringing in presence into the everyday is bringing ritual and ceremony and reverence, I suppose, into life, because otherwise it's just whizzing past us, isn't it? Absolutely. And it's almost like we're missing all of it without these pauses. So yeah, I love what you share, and I agree with you around periods and maiden to mother and all of these aspects of womanhood. And as a mother of two daughters, when periods have come, I was very conscious, because my experience was much like yours, to celebrate it. And we had a big, party that night. And that was actually the day that my daughter got her period, was the day she got her first pendulum, because we talked about the fact that, that's when your intuition really starts to awaken as a woman, and she picked it. And it was it's been a special time. And I think, I don't know necessarily, she might look back on that and think otherwise, but I feel like I'm grateful that she had that experience, because
she will remember that forever.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the thing, exactly what you touched on. It doesn't have to be this big elaborate ritual. It can be just something that you integrate in a fleeting moment in the day. And for me, I have the luxury of having all the mist lined up, and I know every morning I'm going to clean my teeth and I'm going to put moisturizer on. And so I look at the mist, and that is my moment right there to check in with what I need, depending on what I have in the day. So that is my goal, that women, it doesn't have to be my product, but something that you do every day that is then that catalyst for you to check in with yourself. And like I said, it only takes 90 seconds and it can impact the rest of your entire day.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. It's like, yeah, who do I want to show up as today? Because we have these aspects of ourselves. And some days we might want to soften and slow down. And other days we might want to call, as you said, that courage and tigress energy or lion energy that you mentioned earlier. And I want to talk a bit more about your products and particularly the journey of the entrepreneur for you, because, you know, a lot of people, I feel, you know, as someone who has helped many people launch businesses, whether they're online or actual bricks and mortar or product-based businesses, what I think people forget is if you look around your room right now or your house right now or your car, you are literally looking at ideations that previous to their manifestation through the hard work and effort of an individual or a corporation or many people did not exist. So I look at your beautiful products and I think, wow, you have this beautiful idea, this beautiful intention for them. But I know that from that idea and that intention and that ignition in you, to me holding it in the hand, I know that there's a lot that's gone on. And so what was the struggle, if there was one, or what was the greatest learning for you in creating a product-based business?
Oh gosh, you know, I'm constantly coming up against struggles, but the desire in me to want to impact change is stronger. So it's always coming back to listening to that fire within. And so there's been so many times where I could have pulled the pin on that. You know, my son, I've been on such a journey with him, and my entire pregnancy, I had hyperemesis. So there was many opportunities to turn around. But for me, I know this is my soul's purpose. And I've had the opportunity to be able to get really clear on that. And I can share tools on how people might be able to get in touch with their soul's purpose.
Please
But
do.
for me, it's almost like channeling something. I'm very in touch with my third eye, and I've done a lot of work around that. So for me, this brand is beyond me. It's about how I can express my experiences and my journey and help other women that way. And that is my biggest passion in life.
So I'll pause about the commercial realities of your entrepreneurship journey for a second, and we'll come back to them. But talking about your intuition, you said I've done work on that, because I imagine when you were busy being busy, that wasn't something that you were fully tapped into, but you can definitely feel now that you are. And when you say it's your soul's purpose, a lot of people listening are desperate.
Yes.
You know, I know this because I hear this all the time. I just want to know what I'm meant to do. I know there's more for me, but I don't know what it is, you know. What would be your advice to the listeners? What things could they start to do? Real tangible things.
Yeah. Well, first I want to say that we need to realize that there's no greater relationship than that which we have with ourselves. And so many of us are feeling like we don't know who we are anymore, because we know more about people on Instagram's lives than we do our inner selves and our wants and our desires. So we're just so distracted by what everyone else is doing to hear that inner voice inside. And so we keep busy to avoid having to face our true selves. And we're sometimes fearful of what that might look like. So we make decisions based on others' expectations, and we abandon ourselves. And we have to disconnect from the labels and the titles and the previous standards that we've set for ourselves and that other people have set for ourselves, to cultivate self-awareness, to switch on our internal GPS. And that is our navigation system. Someone might be pulling you in a certain direction, but you feel like what you want is actually over there. Well, that's your intuition. And I think a lot of us we're more worried about our self-image than focusing on our true self. And that's where we get lost. And this flows on and leads to discontent in every aspect of our life. And I think, as you say, so many women are longing for something, but we're not quite sure what it is. So how do we discover our dharma, our soul's purpose? And some tangible ways that we can do that is journaling. So coming out of our head and putting things on paper, and not even having any expectations about what goes on the paper. It could be one word, but so many of us are stuck living in the mind and unable to get into our body. So even just that process of physically downloading from our mind and onto paper, that in itself is a transfer. And sometimes what you put on paper can be reflected back to us, and we might be surprised as to what we see. Second would be meditation. And that's just creating space. And that is, the meditation time is an opportunity for our bodies to speak to us. What are our bodies trying to say? Sometimes we need to disconnect to reconnect. And I know meditation, I struggled with it. I'm very type A. I used to get really annoyed. I'd get caught up in the noise and be like, I'm not doing it properly. So I had to rely on a guided meditation. And I didn't do it for long. I just did it for 10 minutes. But as I say, I could see in black and white, it had impacted my cortisol level, with it halving from 3 months of just integrating 10 minutes into your day. The other way that we can bring ourselves back into our body is through breath work. And for a lot of people, they experience things that come up. Like I say, we're afraid to feel. We're in this culture of numbing everything out, and we're afraid to feel the spectrum of emotions. So breath work has been incredibly powerful for me. And if all of these things sound really foreign, one thing that you can do is just dance.
Yeah.
And for me, like every day in the afternoon, like 3 o'clock, I definitely hit that energy slump, and I've got a rebounder, and I go and throw on 3 songs, whatever I'm feeling in the day. And I just go and dance and express myself on the rebounder. And then I am charged up and I'm back in my body, and I've released that anxiety. Whereas the old me would have been like, is it too early for a wine? Do I need to numb out this feeling?
Yeah.
We'll come back to what it was that sparked joy in your life when you were a child. Maybe it was painting.
Yeah.
It's just about what makes you feel at peace. And I think there's this buzzword around self-care, and people think it's this elaborate thing, but actually it's a fundamental human need. We need to intertwine it into our day. It doesn't have to be time consuming. But yeah, it's just evaluating what it is for you that works.
I love that. I mean, I'm just like, yes, yes, yes to all the things. Journaling, meditation, and breathwork are absolutely in my top 5. And then hilariously, you just mentioned rebounding. And before our podcast is recording now, I did a Pure bounce class at Pure, which is on a rebounder. And for a lot of people who don't know, the mini trampoline also releases your lymphatic system. So it's incredibly healing on multiple levels, energetically and cardiovascularly, yes, and low impact, yes. But it unbelievably does cleanse the system like nothing else. So I love that you dance on a rebounder. That's awesome. Okay, so I wanted to, there's so much I want to ask you actually, but two areas I really want to touch on, which is, I know with your products that you have made the very intentional decision to be organic, to be locally sourced and small farm sourced, to be native Australian. And please correct me if any of this is incorrect, but this is from my understanding of your website and your products. And I wanted to speak to that because this sustainability and organic, why is that important? I mean, I really believe it is, but I'd love you to articulate for the listener why we need to be, and actually I want to jump in and just say this. I often sit with, there are very big things going on in the world right now, like really big things. We're on the precipice of an edge, in my opinion. And I think that great things can come from it, but I think there is also, it comes down to the choices we make, like everything. And sometimes, when my children and I watch, documentaries, you can see they're like, well, what do we do? There's nothing we can do as one person. I remind them that there absolutely is. And if every one person does something, that's everyone doing it. And we can turn the tide. But I want to remind particularly woman and man listening, we actually have more power than we think as the consumer. And what I mean by that is, do not underestimate, if you cease to flow your finances into the funnel that at the moment is directed purely towards greed and the raping of this planet and our people, then it will eventually dry up. Like, as in that, the flow that seems, the system that seems unbeatable at times. And like I said, I sit with these thoughts a lot. I'm like, how do we, the system is so flawed. I truly believe in the goodness of people, but the system is flawed. And one of the things we can do is stop spending money on things that are derived from the the degradation of this planet as a primary, and then the people. So I love that it's sustainable and that it's organic and that you're doing small farm and small scale. But please speak to why you chose to do that.
Yeah. Look, I completely resonate with what you're saying about wanting to make a bigger impact. And that can feel really overwhelming, and we can feel like we're failing in that. So when I'm in the right mindset, I can scale it right back to that I am one person. And if we all take responsibility for our own actions, then we can collectively make a change.
Yep.
In part of my process of healing my body, I really went down a path of exploring every way that I could control what was happening to my body. So I was looking at things from the toxic load perspective, and just the realization that all these things that I was doing every day unconsciously were contributing to the hormonal imbalance that I was experiencing. So methodically, I went through all of the things and realized, oh, okay, I'm using really toxic sunscreen every day. Is that really necessary? So then I switched all these things out. And I had a spiritual experience. My husband and I, when we were living in Vancouver, we bought an RV when our visa was up, and we went traveling all around the US, and I'd marked all these things I wanted to go to, all the Whole Food stores and the organic skincare stores. And I wanted to visit this place called Sedona. And when I was there, I did a day course in herbalism. And Sedona is sort of known as this healing sacred space. And I definitely felt that there, similarly to what I felt in Vancouver. And it made me realize it was like the penny dropped. Oh my gosh. Like this sacred space, this sacred land in Australia, there's so much wisdom, sacred plant medicine that we're not tapping into. How can we access that? And I wanted to be, part of the solution to be able to maintain and sustain that plant medicine, rather than it just falling by the wayside and having big commercial industry come in and destroy it. And so I got really intentional. It was the biggest part of building my brand, was reaching out to farmers, actually seeing what they do with the land, what their values are, and how they consciously contribute to sustainability. That was really fundamental to me building the brand. And again, it speaks to that desire within me to want to be able to make change, and letting go of, I can't change everything, but I can change what I'm influencing here with my brand and the impact I'm making with these small scale farms. And a lot of them have really great relationships with Indigenous communities. There's an Indigenous community in Dubbo that I work with, and their purpose is to help empower and educate other Indigenous communities to come in and be able to work with the land the way that it is supposed to be worked with, so we can continue to thrive and we don't rape the earth of the precious gifts that it has. So that was my driving force around that. And another, I suppose, thing to mention is I got really fixated on labeling, and realizing that just because someone pays for an expensive certification label doesn't actually mean that they have intention with how they're working with Mother Nature and having respect there. They can throw money at something and get the certification, but for me, it's so much more important than that. And I even write on my packaging that it goes beyond, this is about having respect for Mother Nature and returning the land in a better condition than the way that we borrowed it from her.
And I really salute you for that, Jennifer, because for anyone who is not in business, it pays to know that your bottom line is affected by these choices in the respect of the profit margin per item, or the ability to sell it at a commercially competitive price. So making these moral decisions sometimes means, cutting a considerable amount from your bottom line, but also sometimes what it does is it stands you in really good stead as a brand of integrity for the long term. So I don't think it ultimately costs us, but it can be a scary place to sit, knowing that you could easily get, some flower essences from, bulk shipped in from wherever. But this is the difference between, a quality product. And we sometimes do have to realize, as much as I, as a mother, am sometimes blown away by the price points at Kmart, and readily admit that I'm like, oh my gosh, it's practically free. Well, the question is, where then is the cost? Because, so And I'm absolutely not perfect in my consumer habits, and I don't pretend to be. But I think that the more that we really look at the ultimate cost, the more we should be prepared to spend money, not on, when I say bullshit, I mean not on bullshit branding, of the stigma or the status of like, the high-end products, because that's just inflated brand brand value, and people who value them are happy to pay for it. But I'm talking about like a brand like yours, where you've really, well, first of all, done so much work to support amazing things, but two, then to bring only quality things into the product. There's also something that translates, I think, as the user who's then using that product. That's a way of saying my body, my vessel, my life is in alignment with this. And it's a way to remind yourself of how you're valuable too. So even if it means you can only buy the product a little less frequently, or you don't spray it everywhere and you just really revere it, I think that's only a good thing too, because we are a little bit complacent in our moreness sometimes in the application of things. And there's a lot to be said for, I don't know, smaller scale and really valuing it. So I that's one of my favorite things about your brand. And of course, we're going to link to everything that you do and all of your products. And I really, even just the fact that you're, a female founder in an Australian company doing really sustainable, beautiful things, I really call to my listeners that if you're looking for a beautiful product, a gift, just buy one of these and let your friend really feel the value of it rather than heaps of shit. We don't need more shit in the world. We don't need tons of things. Let's have less and have them be more valuable and really feel the beauty of that. And Christmas is coming up. So go and check out Blūm Organics and get yourself something, and get your sisters, your mothers, all of the women in your life something beautiful.
Thank you. Yes, we really do vote with our dollar as well,
That's exactly my point. I don't know if I finished that thought before, but as consumers, we have the power, and we must remember that. And where we put our dollar, we are putting our vote. We are putting our vote where we put our dollar. So if you're against it, then stand against it and be integral in that by not spending the money and doing the research. I didn't realize that Nutella is made of just palm oil, but now I do. What am I going to do with that knowledge? Et cetera, et cetera. All right. When you create a product, like on a really commercial level, is there a factory? Like, do you make these, like, how does someone's like, I really want to, I don't know, create really unique pens, or I want to create hats that have something amazing, with sun protection, whatever the product may be. Where do they start? Did you reach out to manufacturers? Did you reach out to existing people? Like, for someone who's like, I would love to start a conscious product brand, but I don't even know what step one would be. What would you say to them?
I think it seems really scary and overwhelming when you start this journey. And yes, definitely there's a lot of things that you have to tackle one by one. For me, I just started with education, and that was studying. I've become certified in organic skincare formulation. So that was step one, understanding and feeling confident that what I was bringing out into the world was safe for pregnant mothers and newborn babies. So that was a really big thing for me. But again, surprisingly, you assume that these governing bodies have got our back and that there's regulations around these things. And actually, it's quite loose. And I don't want to lose people's confidence around things because, as a brand owner, there are so many hoops that you jump through to make sure that you're ticking, all of the boxes. But at this point in time, I manufacture everything here in my home, following GMP, so good manufacturing practices at home, in a stainless steel facility, and being mindful around the way that it's processed to avoid bacterial contamination and that sort of thing. So for me, at this point in time, I haven't had the need to outsource the manufacturing, and I love having control over that. I love having my hands on the process. But I think if there's something that you want to birth into this world, start small and definitely get in contact with someone that is doing something that you're interested in. And you'll find that people love mentoring. They love being able to help others in a position that they saw themselves in a few years ago. So I have had people that I've reached out to as mentors, people that have started on this journey and then transitioned into taking more of a role into motherhood. But it's all about community and building on that. And people love sharing information and sharing their skill sets. So I think don't be intimidated. I was in the beginning, but you work through that, feel the fear, do it anyways.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say there for people, which I think is a really good steer for them, is educate yourself first, because then from that place of education, you'll know which crumbs to follow. And those crumbs will lead to the next crumb and lead to the next crumb. And every time you'll hit that roadblock, the question is, okay, so how do I navigate over this? And in asking those questions and expanding the curiosity and knowing that everything is surmountable and figure outable, you're going to then go, okay, who might I need to ask? And you will just develop. And at the top of our talk, you said, you love solving problems. And I think that's really the way of the entrepreneur is I will make a way, I will find a way. And so, as you said, it is definitely not smooth sailing, but when you are committed and your why is strong enough, as we can very clearly hear yours is, you make a way out of no way, which means, what don't I know? Who do I need to call? What path do I need to open and unfold into? And I like that your product is made locally and by you, because people often think that there's a safety in these large structures, but just think about the energetics of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Think about the energetics of that. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. We've just shared so much. And so I suppose the last question I really wanted to ask you is, if you look back at your journey, and you've learned so much as a mother, and since this journey began, I'm sure motherhood changed you, becoming an entrepreneur's changed you. I speak, and actually yesterday I just gave a talk about whole womanhood and the owning of all of our parts, and your journey even back to health, and then your journey into becoming a medicine woman of sorts, and learning to work with products and create and alchemize. And so I can feel all of the parts of you, but I'm curious, in that whole journey, if you were going to put one message in a bottle to the people of the world to say, hey guys, team, listen up, this is what I've really learned is true, what would you say?
Remember the power that you have within, and that your body holds all the innate wisdom that will ever need to heal itself. You are your own guru.
Oh, I love it. I just got chills. I love it. I love it. I love it. And you're so right. And I know that you actually, your beautiful writing that you have around your brand as well, that there was something I read that you're very, very vocal on women in particular understanding the importance of putting themselves first, and addressing that. So I agree with you. We have the wisdom within us. I agree that when something is not showing up as we want it to, it is a call to arms. It's a request from the body. It's not the body breaking down. It's literally saying, hey, come over here, take a look at this. But what would you say, because the talk I gave yesterday, I was explaining the lineage and the history of why women are wired to put people first. And we've kind of touched on that, but when people go, oh, but I need to put everyone else first, they need me, or that's how it is. Why, in your opinion, is it more important that actually people put, I think I might have just said that last bit wrong, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why is it important that we put ourselves first? Why do we need to shift this narrative?
We're so programmed to be of service of others. And I feel like the epitome of love that we can have for our children and for this next generation, for us as mothers, to give ourselves permission to live fully, because our children will only live as fully as we allow ourselves to live. So they're constantly watching our actions. They may not be listening to our words, but they're subconsciously absorbing everything that we do. So it is our duty to not settle for a mediocre life and to live our fullest expression, because that's the greatest gift that we can give to others, is to live our fullest expression, because it gives them permission to do so.
I agree. And as a family constellations facilitator, I can definitely back up what you're saying. And it's beyond even what they're feeling or sensing. We on a 7 generations deep are receiving with DNA the codes of our family, and this is why our healing will affect the generations to come. So I agree with you there. Now, Jennifer, quick fire questions.
Yep.
What would be your number one tip today for someone who wanted to activate more energy in their body?
It's not sexy, but more water.
Do you know what? I'm with you. I'm always say drink more water. Babe,
Yeah.
that's like right up there for me. I think it's often my number one health tip is more water. So it doesn't have to be sexy. It just needs to work, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Most of us are chronically dehydrated, and that's the thing that leads to fatigue. So if we want more energy, charge up ourselves, and it's the quality of the water as well. I heard once that if you don't have a filter, you become a filter. And someone really conscious of like detoxing and having my system work as effectively as it can. If I can outsource the filtering, then that's a top recommendation.
That's awesome. All right. And what would you recommend for elevating the sense of empowerment?
Oh, I think stop fighting. Use my products.
Use the Aura Mist. I'm giving you the heads up to promote here, but you were going to say something else, so I'll step back.
I think stop fighting against our life force. It's all this subliminal messaging, and there's so much self-empowerment by truly knowing and understanding our bodies and working with that cyclical nature, which I know some of your previous guests have spoken about, so I'm sure they can check that out. But like also activating our womb energy, this portal, to the spiritual realm. We hold that within ourselves, our bodies. We bring the soul in, and it is birthed into the physical realm. So we don't necessarily need to be creating new life, but we can tap into and create ideas from our womb energy. And something that I do is just a guided meditation around that and bringing awareness to our womb, especially in different periods of our month, of our cycle, is being able to tap into that and use that energy, that life force, and bring it out. Yeah. I physically get my body involved and bring that energy upwards and outwards.
And I know that you have some beautiful rituals, if you will, cards that talk about, the full moon ceremonies and ideas of what to do and journaling prompts. And I think that's beautiful. And the full moon versus the new moon, if women really wanted to start to come into this awareness of the cycles, what should they be aware of the difference between the two? So what should we be focusing on in the full moon ritual versus the new moon ritual? I know that we're kind of past that point of unpacking something, but I think that would be really juicy for some listeners.
Yeah, I think in really simple terms, the new moon, the dark moon, is the time where we go within, we retreat, and we might naturally feel that way. And if you're not in tune with this, you might almost be thinking, I've got this party on this weekend, but I really don't want to go. And you might be, working through that yourself. But if you're aware of it and go, I'm on my moon, I'm having my cycle this weekend, that's why I feel the urge to be an introvert. Whereas the full moon is the time where you're fully expressive. And before modern life, before the introduction of lights and artificial lighting, we would be under the moon, and that's the perfect time to procreate. So when we're synced up with the lunar cycle, that's the time where we're ovulating, and it's the most fertile time of the month. And the power of the moon actually has the ability to help guide the sperm to the egg. So there's so much. I encourage women to really look into that because it's such an important part of understanding our hormonal rhythm and how we can work with that and leverage it in our everyday lives. And we don't have to go all woo-woo with that, but it might just be an awareness around, okay, well, I'm going to book this podcast interview when I'm ovulating, or, using that energy to leverage and how we can help ourselves in our everyday lives.
Beautiful. And if someone was, really into a lot of what we discussed, or particularly your journey, what would you say has been a really pivotal book or an undertaking, whether it was your course that you did? Like if someone's like, oh, I'd love to learn, I'd love to dive more into this, what would be a resource that was really helpful to you?
Yeah, it's so easy for me. The life-changing book was Elisa Vitti's Woman Code, to debunk everything that I had been taught from my doctor through the education system, all about disempowering ourselves and switching off our hormonal rhythm rather than leaning into it and tapping into it. And she's got 2 books, and her second one is In the Flow, and that really dives deep into the 28-day or our monthly cycle and the ebbs and flows, and really understanding and having a greater appreciation for our body, because so much of our self-worth comes from this relationship that we have with our body. So if we can treat it kinder, and I always say now that I back her and she backs me. And I really feel that there's so much power in that, and it can shift some of the feelings that women have around getting their period and feeling shame and not looking forward to it. So I think that Woman Code or In the Flow is a must read.
We'll link to those. Yeah, we'll pop them in the show notes. And I agree with you that there's such an opportunity for us as women when it comes to reclaiming our power, really addressing and facing or looking at and then reintegrating the shame we have around our bodies, around sex, around our cycles, around all of it, because we have, disowned and really distorted some of the aspects of us that actually hold not only our magic and our beauty, but our power. So I couldn't agree more. Jennifer, is there anything else that you would love to touch on? We've kind of gone broad and wide, but I feel like this has been such a beautiful conversation for our listeners. But yeah, was there anything that you feel called maybe to share that we didn't complete on or didn't get to?
I think just the understanding of that you're not doing nothing when you choose to put your well-being first, that in fact it's the key to having everything.
Well, as they say, health is the first wealth, isn't it? And I agree completely. Without it, it's what is that thing that they say? I can't remember now, but it's like the person who is ill has just one goal. So agree. And me too. So definitely, if you're listening, and particularly if you're facing off with a health situation right now, know that you have the power to continue. And one of the things actually that I really loved about your share, Jennifer, that I want to point out to the listener is don't disown your inner voice when it comes to your body and your health. And it was much the same for me. I had people giving me pills for things, and I did ignore my body for a long time until I didn't. And I'm glad eventually I didn't. And your body is wise, so wise, but we just must listen to her. Yes. Jennifer, thank you so much for today. You are just such an inspiration and such a, an example of the beautiful whole woman that we all get to be if we open to ourselves. So thank you. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Thank you.